I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Thursday and we are wrapping up the NFL unit grades. Been going over this for about the last 6 weeks. Now we are on the final stretch, the top 8 pass catching groups in the AFC. But before we get to that, you know, it is training camp season, so a few things have come out. Noah Brown was carted off. I believe it was on Wednesday. They what?
So damn it.
Yeah, no updates on how hurt he is. There was a moment where the internet held its collective breath when Brian Thomas Jr. was carted off, but apparently he's fine. James Cook showed up to Bills camp, which many didn't expect. Terry McLaurin did not show up to Commanders camp, which was probably a little bit of a bummer for them. And the Broncos signed J.K. Dobbins. Dennis, it feels like Dobbins news is probably the most fantasy relevant at this point in time. You know, Cook and McLaurin want new deals. Will it happen? No one knows. But what do you make of the news the first few days of minicamp?
You know, it's still so early in the summer. And look, I want to get excited about J.K. Dobbins. I really do. But isn't he kind of an old multi-injury RJ Harvey? I mean, Dobbins probably a little more of an inside runner, but you know, I don't know. It's hard to. I love Dobbins. I think he's got a lot of ability, but he struggled to stay healthy. Now he goes where he's probably going to be the number 2, I guess, behind RJ Harvey. And Sean Payton runs a lot of passing down running back stuff. So Harvey will probably get the majority of the passing down reps if he holds up in protection. And then they'll bring in Audric Estime when they need a 1-yard touchdown, since he weighs 230 pounds. So I get it. He's making $2.75 million with another, 2.5 guarantee or in incentives. I haven't looked to see whether or not those will be easy to reach. But I mean, I guess 2.75 is a lot more than I'm making this year. It's a backfield to watch. I know a lot of people love RJ Harvey based on the draft capital and the Sean Payton offense. I probably still want Cortland Sutton in that offense over everybody else.
I think Sutton and Harvey. I still think Harvey's going to be the main back, and they'll mix Dobbins. And I think the one that should be the most worried is Jaleel McLaughlin, and that certainly seems to be the consensus feeling of a lot of the beat writers here, is that he can be on the chopping block because there's nothing that he does that's particularly great or unique. You know, he had some burst as a runner, but he's not a great pass catcher, and he was horrific in pass blocking, which is why, you know, as a rookie, he ceded a lot of time to Samaje Perine, and last year why they kept having Javonte Williams out there when they were running things, because he couldn't do it. And I think, you know, that might be a question for for Harvey too, but we'll see. Denver
How
trying
many do they usually carry for running backs?
They only kept 3 last year.
Okay.
They only kept 3 the year before.
Trying to find
They released Samaje Perine at the end of camp and kept McLaughlin, Estime, and Javonte Williams. Then they brought back one Blake Watson on the practice squad, but and they had somebody else on the practice squad. I think it was their fullback, Michael Burton, went to the practice squad.
Or my depth chart. I just accidentally closed it.
Yeah. So
yeah, they have Tyler Badie and Blake Watson are probably the practice squad candidates. So it could be the end of the line for Jaleel McLaughlin.
Yeah, wouldn't be a big surprise. I think they want to do something different. I know some people think it's Estime that's going to get released, but I think he plays just a different role is why they would keep him. Sometimes on game day, they only had 2 running backs active. So see how it goes.
So our lad slotted Dobbins in as the starter over Harvey. Do you think that's likely to start the season? You think it's veteran deference?
No, I don't think it's likely.
Do you think it matters?
No, I don't think it matters.
What do you think the split will be if Dobbins and Harvey get 80% of the touches? What do you think the split will be in that?
Probably as close to 50-50 as it gets. I mean, it was pretty, unless, like you said, Harvey can't block or it becomes a pass blocking liability. I don't remember Dobbins being a great pass blocker either. So, Audric Estime, come on down.
Yeah, at least he's big enough to just get in the way.
Yeah, or that might trend toward them keeping Michael Burton. It's problematic if you don't have a guy back there that can catch the ball, because that was actually what buoyed a lot of Javonte Williams' fantasy numbers last year, as he would catch half a dozen passes. It was for 30 yards, but
right,
PPR points are PPR points, and that was what made Ryan interesting in 23. So, speaking of those Broncos, we're doing the our top 8 pass catching groups. And while I had them in the first group, you have them here at number 8. I will give their depth chart again. And the reminder, this is receivers and tight ends. They list Cortland Sutton, Marvin Mims, and Devon Vele as their starters. They have the rookie Pat Bryant, Troy Franklin in year 2, Trent Sherfield, who is more of a special teamer, and A.T. Perry, who is a former New Orleans Saint. At tight end, they brought in Evan Ingram. They brought back Adam Troutman. They have Nate Adkins, who's kind of a blocker fullback type, Lucas Kroll, who was an interesting receiver at times last year, and the rookie Caleb Lohner.
So, for me, a lot of it hinges around Cortland Sutton, and then the breakouts of Marvin Mims and Devon Vele. I got to be honest. Last year I was like, who the hell is Devon Vele? But he's a big slot guy, not overly fast, but he was productive. And then Marvin Mims came on and really had a late season breakout. It seemed like he kind of got past the injuries and out of the doghouse. And Bo Nix and him had a connection that I think a lot of us felt like he would have with Troy Franklin, who was his old college teammate. But Mims just was lighting it up last year late. So I think Sutton continues to be the target hog. I know there's been a lot of talk about, he wants that joker guy like he had with Taysom Hill. Evan Ingram isn't, I don't know that he's really a joker kind of tight end. He's just an athletic pass catching tight end. And you can use him as a mismatch in the slot and out wide. You can use him like that, but I don't think, we're going to see many Evan Ingram snaps under center out of the shotgun. Or much of him lining up in the backfield. A lot of dynasty analysts are high on Pat Bryant. A A lot of them look at him as the successor to Cortland Sutton. I love Sutton when he came out. He struggled some with health and didn't necessarily produce as consistently as I would have liked. But he had a great season last year. Trent Sherfield, yeah, God bless him, but I hope he never sees the field. He's kind of a dollar store Noah Brown, who we mentioned earlier. He's got some size. He'll get out there. He'll hit some people in the blocking game. But, outside of their top five there, with the rookie Bryant being the fifth, I had some hopes for A.T. Perry coming out. He hasn't really panned out. They've got a lot of street free agents, a lot of college free agent rookies there in the bottom 6 of their 12 wide receivers that I'm not really looking to roster even in deep dynasties. But I like Mims. I like Sutton. I like Vele. I think they provide Bo Nix with a pretty reliable group of receivers, them and Ingram, at all three levels. And I'm looking forward to them being productive again in year 2.
Yeah, they only kept 5 receivers on the active roster last year, so I think even keeping 6, which is what I would guess right now, would be a step up. I don't even think Perry will be kept on the active roster. I think Sherfield was a signing for special teams, and it'll be Franklin, Bryant, Vele, Mims, and Sutton who will be the pass catchers. My number 8, I have a team that you actually had in the bottom group, another AFC West team, and that is the Los Angeles Chargers. They list Mike Williams, Quentin Johnson, Ladd McConkey as starters right now. They have Trey Harris, Keandre Lambert-Smith, 2 rookies on the roster, Darius Davis, Brendan Rice, and Jalen Reagor. At tight end, they have Will Dissly, Tyler Conklin, Rondé Gadsden, who's turning some heads in minicamp, and Tucker Fisk. The Chargers are an interesting group. Last year, kind of their bright spot was McConkey. He caught 82 passes for 1,149 yards. I think he's a solid number 1 option, but he needed help. They've tried to get him some. They brought back Mike Williams. He did not have a great year last year with the Jets and Steelers, but he has been pretty solid for them in the past. They signed tight end Will Conklin, who with the Jets last year caught 51 passes. I like him adding with Will Dissly. If Rondé Gadsden starts emerging, they have some options there. I'm like you said on Monday, I'm not super high on Quentin Johnston, but I do like the Harris pick. He caught 114 passes for 2,015 yards on 15 touchdowns the last 2 seasons at Ole Miss. With McConkey as the anchor and Harris and Williams out there and the mix they have at tight end, I thought they have an upgrade on what they had last year. Your number 7 is the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens on the depth chart currently list DeAndre Hopkins, Rashad Bateman, Zay Flowers as starters. They have Devontae Walker, Tylan Wallace, and the rookie LaJohntay Webster. Tight end Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, and Charlie Kohler. I have the Ravens up a little bit higher, but why are you a little lower on Baltimore?
Some of it comes down to volume and how it's going to be spread around. I love Mark Andrews. He's getting a little bit older. It feels like he's probably on his last contract with Baltimore and may be gone before it's over. Isaiah Likely is kind of making a push as the new pass-catching tight end there. I love Zay Flowers. Rashad Bateman, best agent in the business, signed another extension. But he seems to be stepping up now that he's a few years into the league. I don't know what DeAndre Hopkins has left in the tank. Do I think he's better than Tez Walker? Yeah, probably. But, their top 5 with Wallace and Walker, I think they're pretty good with their top 3. I think Bateman, Flowers, Andrews, and Likely are really the core of it, but it's a lower volume passing offense. You've got Derrick Henry, who is going to command a lot of touches, and then Lamar Jackson, who runs the ball a lot as well. Now, that being said, they do sometimes narrow the funnel when it comes to the passing game. But you also, it's tough owning rostering Mark Andrews when Isaiah Likely's going for 80 and 2 touchdowns. It's tough rostering Zay Flowers when Rashad Bateman's getting 7 for 130 and a touchdown. So for me, I like the parts and pieces. I'd like a little more passing volume out of them, and maybe a little narrower funnel. I don't know that they will force the ball to DeAndre Hopkins, but I think there will be some perception that he'll demand some volume based on his reputation and the career that he's had, and that may hamper Flowers and Bateman.
My number 7 is a team you had in your bottom group, and that is the Cleveland Browns. You had them right at 9, so not that much higher. Their roster, wide receivers, they list Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman, and Jamari Thrash as starters. They have Deontay Johnson, Michael Woods, DeAndre Carter, and David Bell on the roster. They list David Njoku as their starting tight end. They have the rookie Harold Fannin, Blake Whiteheart, and Trey McKitty. They made a leap for me because of some of the things that I saw in 2024. Despite difficulties in general on offense, some of the receivers stepped up. Jeudy had a career year. He caught 90 passes for 1,229 yards, despite the revolving door at quarterback. I think that's a good start. They also got some good things from Tillman. They have a great tight end in David Njoku. What makes them more interesting to me is probably Johnson. Look, I know he had a disastrous 2024, but prior to that, in 5 years with the Steelers, he got 391 passes for 4,363 yards. If he can rebound, this could be a more intimidating group. And he's said the right things when they've talked to him at training camp. He said he wants to put last year behind him. He doesn't want to talk about what might have went wrong. He is focused on being the best player he can be for Cleveland. And if he can return to something like that form, that's a pretty intimidating top 3 receivers. Still questions, obviously, at quarterback, but a pretty intimidating top 3 receivers plus a good tight end and a very interesting rookie in Fannin. So that was enough for me to bump the Browns up a little bit. Your number 6 is a team that I had in the bottom half of the draw, and that is the Las Vegas Raiders. They list Trey Tucker, Jack Beck, and Jacoby Myers as receivers, starting receivers. They have the rookie Deontay Thornton Jr. and Tommy Mellott, and veteran Colin Johnson on the roster. Tight ends, Brock Bowers, Michael Mayer, Ian Thomas, and Justin Shorter. I am guessing Brock Bowers figures heavily into you having them at 6.
He does. Now, I'm probably a little higher on Jacoby Myers and Jack Beck than you are. And I did like what I saw out of Trey Tucker last year as well. He provides them with a legitimate deep threat. And I like what Geno's going to bring to the table there. I think with Ashton Genty, it's going to provide them with some balance. And last year, the Raiders, and I get it, they've changed coaching staffs. But last year they were 4th in pass attempts with, Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew.
Yeah,
but they also had no running game.
Ritter hardly played, but yeah, they had their running game was really bad.
Seattle was 7th in pass attempts with Geno last year. So I do put a lot of stock in Brock Bowers here. I think he is the de facto tight end one. The argument can be made that, Trey McBride's up there, but I think right now in Dynasty, Brock Bowers is, if you roster him, it would take a Godfather deal to get him off your roster. And, I don't know if those exist.
I think a better comp for Geno where he would be 2023, which is when Pete Carroll was still the head coach, because last year they had a different coach, different offensive scheme, but they were definitely not too bad. I'm looking at their overall team stats. It looks like they were league offense 17th in pass attempts with Geno in 23. Not too bad. My number 6, I went with the Miami Dolphins, and I know some people are going to say it's too low, and I get it, but hear me out. They list Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Malik Washington as starters. They signed Nick Westbrook-Ikini. They have Taj Washington and Eric Ezukanma at receiver. They have Jonnu Smith currently at tight end, Pharaoh Brown, and Julian Hill. Look, beyond the top 2 receivers and the tight end, there are a ton of questions. There is no depth in this team. And I know Nick Westbrook-Ikini made some contributions at times for the Titans, but the Titans, who are much lower on this list than the Dolphins, did not make it a priority to bring him back, which gives me a little pause about how great of an addition he is. You know, Tyreek Hill has tremendous upside, but he has become more of an off-field distraction. He's going through some kind of hideous public spectacle of a divorce. He's getting older, and his interest in being a Dolphin seemed to ebb and flow the past few months. Sometimes it's like, trade me. He posts weird cryptic things on Twitter, and then it's like, we've never been closer. I don't know what to feel about that. Waddle, a player I like, but his targets and receptions have declined in each of his 4 professional seasons. He's had trouble at times the last couple of years staying on the field. That's one of the reasons that Smith had a career high and Dolphins record 88 receptions in 2024. But that is 38 more receptions than his previous career high of 50, which he had just in 2023. Maybe he's that rare, like, season 7 breakout. But Jonnu Smith wants a new contract, and Miami seems to be actively shopping him. So I don't know if he's even there. And then you're talking about Hill, Waddle, a bucket full of question marks, and Pharaoh Brown. So 6 might end up being generous. There's upside here, but there is cause for concern. And that's why I just couldn't bring myself to put them any higher than 6. You have the Kansas City Chiefs as your number 5 squad. They list Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown, and Rashee Rice as starters. They have Sky Moore, Jalen Royals, the rookie, and Juju Smith-Schuster on the roster. Their starting tight end, a guy you may have heard of. I hear he's dating some kind of singer, and that is Travis Kelce. They also have Noah Gray, Jared Wiley, and Robert Tonyan. What do you like about the Chiefs?
I love their top 3 wide receivers. Some similar overlapping skill sets, but they're all guys with really good speed that can get open. And they don't have, a true alpha outside of Travis Kelce. I think Kelce's eyeing, the door, and I think he's going to want to try to put up one last monster season. And when you've got the field stretchers like Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown, it's going to help open that up for him and Rashee Rice. I know he hasn't been, what he was 4 or 5 years ago, but Patrick Mahomes is a pretty dang good quarterback, and he can throw the ball really well. And I think this group of receivers is probably one of the most dynamic foursomes with Kelce that he's probably had in his career. Early in his career, he had Tyreek Hill, who kind of dominated things with Kelce. But having Worthy away from him, that's going to allow him to be really productive again. So I know I probably weighted it a little heavy because of who their quarterback is, but it's 4 really dynamic receivers. Jalen Royals will probably end up being their 4th guy. I'm out on Sky Moore and Juju Smith-Schuster, but they'll, I guess if I had to pick somebody outside the top 4, I'm probably going to pick Noah Gray, their second tight end, who has flashed. So,
Yep, you never know. I like the Chiefs group too. I actually have them at number 4, one notch higher than where you have them. Rice had 24 receptions last year before being lost for the season at the beginning of week 4. So he was off to a huge hot start. And even though Kelsey's getting older, he still had 97 receptions last year. I think he's still a good target. If they can get a better health season from Rice and Brown, year 2 of Worthy, and maybe some rookie contributions from Royals and contributions from Gray, I think they'll be just fine. My number 5 was actually the Ravens, who you had a little bit lower. I think Flowers is a solid top option. Andrews and Likely I like at tight end. But what had me moving them up is the addition of Hopkins, and I think Bateman is a player that we laugh about the extensions, but maybe overlook. He had 756 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns last season. He has developed into a really solid part of that offense. He seems to have good rapport with Lamar Jackson, and they really like him there. And I think those are things you can't really underrate. And even though it was a weird mishmash season with the Titans and Chiefs, Hopkins still had 56 receptions for 610 yards. He can really contribute. And as a third receiver, as a guy you bring in as a weapon, I think that's going to work just fine. He might be like the 4th or 5th passing game option, and that's pretty good for a team. So they were my 5. Your number 4 is the team I have at 3, and that is the Indianapolis Colts. On their depth chart at receiver, they list Pittman Jr., Alec Pierce, and Josh Downs as starters. They have Adonai Mitchell, Ashton Doolin, and Anthony Gould, also Laquan Treadwell. At tight end, they went and picked up a hot rookie in Tyler Warren. They still have Mo Cox, Drew Ogletree, Jelani Woods, Sean McKeon, Will Mallory, Albert Okuibunam, and a partridge in a pear tree. What has the Colts sitting at 4 for you?
I really struggled with the Colts receivers because I really like the receivers, but they've got a god-awful quarterback situation. And, it's crazy that we're sitting around going, oh, please let Daniel Jones win this job. Michael Pittman, I think, is a really, really good receiver. He's an ex-receiver, big, good speed, can go get the ball, good route runner. Alec Pierce has a ton of speed. Also, another big guy can battle for the ball. Josh Downs is one of those guys that it's easy to forget about, but he seems to always be open. He's got good speed. He can get down the field too, but he works that short area really, really, really good. Tyler Warren is the wild card in this group. He comes out of college as, unfortunately for him, people are hanging the next Brock Bowers tag on him. But he did a lot of things.
He had 104 receptions last year.
I know.
So that's why.
He did, and he did a lot of things. He ran the Wildcat. He threw the ball a little bit. He's a very talented player, and I'm hoping that whoever is under center is just competent enough to get us 500 pass attempts. 550 would be great. But they also have Jonathan Taylor. But it feels like they may be in a situation where they're having to throw the ball because they may try to be conservative early in the games and then get behind. So then they've got to throw the ball some, and that could be beneficial. But as talents, I love the top 4 in Indianapolis.
Yeah, I liked what Indianapolis had too. Pittman, despite their quarterback situation last year, Pittman 69 receptions, 72 for Downs. They've been a good one too. Alec Pierce kind of developed into a deep threat that we didn't see coming, and they still have Adonai Mitchell to work in there. I think they go pretty deep. Warren is the wild card. You mentioned 104 receptions, over 1,200 yards last year at Penn State. Does he eat into the production of the receivers? I think my biggest trepidation with the Colts is not this group, which is why I have them at 3. It's what the hell are they doing at quarterback? Anthony Richardson didn't look great last year and can't seemingly get his shoulder healthy. Daniel Jones is somewhat of an enigma to me. So, they have a great running back and a great pool of receivers, and they still may have a mediocre offense, and that's kind of a shame. Your number 3, you had the Miami Dolphins. I was a little lower. I mentioned why I'm cautious about them. Why are you more cautiously optimistic?
I get it that, it's not a deep receiving core. It's really 3 guys.
And
It's
maybe only
Hill.
2 guys by the time the season starts.
It's Hill and it's Waddle. Yeah, if Jonnu goes away, I'm definitely going to be moving them down. I think part of what happens here is that Jonnu Smith has shown he can be a viable weapon at the tight end position. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, I think, are both extremely talented players. Both can be high-end wide receivers. And because they don't have a ton of other things, as provided they stay healthy, it's going to be a narrow funnel in the pass game. It's going to be those 3 guys getting most of the opportunities in the passing game. And that's going to be really, really good for fantasy. I believe in Tua Tagovailoa's talent. The injury history scares the death out of me. But when they're clicking on that offense and they're hitting all of that timing stuff, they are just a phenomenal scoring offense. They can put up yards and they can put up points. And it's a narrow funnel. And I think, to me, different than, say, the Ravens, where they've got 5 options that they're trying to throw the ball to. Here it's 3, and that's who's going to get the ball, and that's who's going to produce for your fantasy team.
At number 2, we both have the same team, and that is the Houston Texans. They list Nico Collins, the rookie Jaden Higgins, and Christian Kirk as starters. They have Tank Dell on the roster, but he is probably not likely to play in 25 after suffering a gruesome injury to end last year. They have John Mechie III, another rookie in Jalen Noel, Xavier Hutchinson, Justin Watson, and Braxton Berrios. At tight end, their starters Dalton Schultz. They also have Brevin Jordan, Cade Stover, and the rookie Luke Lachey. For me, I think Nico Collins, a great number 1 for them. He had 68 receptions and over 1,000 yards in only 12 games last year. I like the addition of Kirk, who's a solid veteran, but I really like snagging Higgins. He had 87 for 1,183 yards with Iowa State last year. They have some depth. They also have a solid tight end in Schultz. I think it was a pretty easy call for me who the top 2 teams in the AFC were.
Yeah, it's, when you look at the depth of this receiving group, it can get a little distracting because you get down to their third stringers and you've got Xavier Hutchinson, Justin Watson, and Braxton Berrios, who, if they slid up to be, in the wide receiver 4 or 5 for this team, you probably wouldn't flinch at any of them being there. You'd be like, okay, well, if Xavier Hutchinson's my 4 and he's outside, I'm okay with that. Jaden Higgins, we'll have to see what's the rookie learning curve for him. He's kind of similar athletically to Nico Collins. John Mechie is a guy that I like coming out of college, and I almost felt like he was going to be targeted to the slot. I mean, he's got decent enough size to play outside, but he's not super fast, and I'm excited to see how he does. You love the feel-good story of him coming back from cancer and getting back on the field. I think he can be productive. Jalen Noel, I think he fits nice behind Christian Kirk as the successor there. If Collins, Higgins, and Noel are the starters next year, I don't think anybody would be surprised. I don't know what's going to happen with Tank Dell. He's had a couple gruesome injuries. Is he going to be able to bounce back? Their tight end room is just, it's solid, if not spectacular. Dalton Schultz is reliable, good two-way tight end. He's going to protect the quarterback. He's going to get open. Brevin Jordan's a pretty good pass catcher. Cade Stover's still learning. Luke Lachey, I think, is more of a blocking tight end. I don't expect a whole lot of production. But if something happened to Schultz, I think Stover and Jordan would be viable at the tight end position. So overall, it's a really, really deep receiving group.
Yeah, it is really good. The number one, possibly number one in the NFL as a whole, but definitely tops in the AFC. The Cincinnati Bengals. They list Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Andre Yosevas as starters. Kendrick Pryor, Jermaine Burton, Charlie Jones on the roster. They also brought back Mike Gesicki at tight end. They have Drew Sample, Eric Alla on the roster, another guy not likely to play this year due to injury, and Tanner Hudson. Them being able to bring back Chase and Higgins, I thought was huge. Yosevas, number 3 option, had 6 TDs last year. Mike Gesicki was a great performer last year for them. I think my only knock against them would be maybe not the deepest squad, but when you have that kind of top end, we'll see what Jermaine Burton develops into, but they were easily the number 1 for me.
Yeah, Chase and Higgins it's absurd that that's their wide receiver group. And they like Gesicki. I think they'll run a lot of 2 tight end stuff with Drew Sample as the blocking tight end and Gesicki split out. When they go 3 wide with a tight end, they're dangerous. Yosevas he's just kind of a solid nondescript guy. There's been a lot of positive buzz about Jermaine Burton, how he's kind of looked back on his rookie season and been like, yeah, I was kind of a doofus. Let me get my act together so I don't get shown the door. Charlie Jones is a reasonable backup. He's more of a special teamer. They're not deep, but they do have 2 of the most elite wide receivers in the NFL and arguably the overall wide receiver 1. They've got a quarterback that can sling it and is not afraid.
Yeah, I mean, as long as they could stay healthy, and I know Higgins has talked about that a lot. It was limited to the 12 games last year, but made a pretty indelible impression with 10 touchdowns in those 12 games. Did really well for them. But Chase, 1,700 yards, 127 receptions, 17 touchdowns. If those guys are both going full steam, then you have luxuries like Yosevas and Gesicki. Watching Denver play them down the stretch in a crucial game last year was not fun. They may have no defense, though.
Yeah, which bodes well for that receiving group.
Well, that'll do it for us today. That'll do it for us for the NFL unit grades. We will be off next week. We will be back on Monday, June 23rd. Beginning division previews, we'll be looking at the NFC North, a division that's near and dear to Dennis and my heart, with the Lions, the Packers, the Vikings, and the Bears. So that should be a fun one to kick off division previews. Dennis, people have a little bit of a gap in time when they're going to be missing us. Well, I'm gallivanting in Florida and you're going to baseball games like it's your full-time job. What can they do to fill that time?
Well, they can do what we do, and they go to their favorite podcast platform, hit that search bar, type in the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast, give us a follow, give us a subscribe, a like, whatever, rating, review, all that fun stuff.
Well, hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Hope you have a great next week. Enjoy the June weather. It's supposed to be hotter here. Hopefully the sun's coming out for you so you can get in. You're supposed to play 3 baseball games next week?
2 next week, 3 the week after, something like that. I don't know. We'll see what happens. We're supposed to get 2 rainouts rescheduled.
You might be playing games every day.
Maybe.
Yeah, and you might end up having to go out there and help them. They'll be too tired.
My shoulder's bad. I can't.
If it wasn't bad before, it will be if you go out there and try to play a few innings with some teens. Well, that'll do it for us. Hope you guys have a wonderful week. We'll see you on Monday, June 23rd.